You've made it all the way up to where Maple begins to discover what truly lies behind the night sky. This is an excellent book. I hope you buy the book. It's right now, at this point, it's pretty expensive. The link's in the description. You can also go to my website, www.drawingsbybrenda.com, and you can get the free download of the book, or you can purchase a hard copy of the book. The book's pretty expensive. It's around $85 to $90. But I hope you get the book, and I hope you're enjoying this reading along to the story of Behind the Night Sky, Finding Run Personal Computer PBR, written by Brendon Holden. Enjoy part 2.
4. Do I love W? He stayed at Bam's house for 3 days. We didn't talk much, slept mostly. On the third day we decided it was time to go home. Brenda went to her dorm and Max went back to his apartment. Alice and I went to my parents to pick up our baby we named Gabriel. As we walked into my parents' house, my dad heard the door open and rushed to it and expressed that he was glad we were home. Gabriel missed you, he said. We told him we went on vacation. That is what the spacemen said to say. I picked up Gabriel and placed her in her car seat, and off we went back home. Alice and I both had work in the morning, so we went to bed early. We did not talk much, but Alice mentioned she loved the city of Orion. A couple of days went by and everything was as normal as always, but there were the occasional strange things that would happen, but the strangest thing was nobody seemed to notice the giant city outside of our time domain. I do not even seem to notice it as well now that I am back on the Earth. As time went forward, we did not talk much about our adventure, but inwardly I did. My major concern was the rest of society. Did they know about Orion? When my friends and I would talk about the city, we thought that it could have been a hallucination or a foreign creature playing a cruel trick on us. In the end we concluded, we could not let our experience get in the way of real life, for example friends, children, our parents, or close loved ones. We could not abandon the Earth to pretend a city was out there. Our home was this planet and these spacemen seemed to be a threat. In the city they seemed to have a power to control our minds, but once broken free we feared what would happen if these spacemen did take over our planet. Alice did not see it that way. She thought that the city gave us Gabriel, and that the city could be a good thing for evolving humans. Because Alice, I and some of the others could figure it out, I decided to take a closer look at the Earth, maybe even check with my parents to see what they knew about alternative realities. After all, we had a year before the spacemen would be back. Bam and I sat in his room gazing at the portal he had made. He understood I wanted more information about the Earth and said, before you look at anything or study anything you should take a good close look at my dog. She's smart. Brendon said, as well you should talk to my parents because they do out of this world type things that you can now relate to. Brendon, if your family is odd then why did you not come on the adventure with us? I asked. Brendon said, my parents want to take me to the place you went to, but their own way. I told them about what I saw in Bam's bedroom, and they thought it was an average thing. Brendon was awfully close to his parents and did a lot of things together, even the strange and out of this world type things. One day while Alice was at work and I was watching the baby, I took the baby to Bam's place. He kept mentioning something about his dog and I was curious about what he was saying. Gabriel needed to spend some time out of the house as well. It was a pleasant summer day as we drove through town. I could smell food in the air. People were busy everywhere. We got to Bam's and I gave a friendly knock and mentioned we were there for the dog. He replied, come on in. As soon as I opened the door, his dog Lacey ran up to us and started greeting us with some friendly barks. Bam said, I think she knew you were coming. Lacey quickly ran up to her large stash of toys and grabbed her favorite one and brought it to me. It was a tennis ball. I thought she wanted me to throw it, so I did. Lacey in response ran after it and put it in her mouth and brought it back to me. Bam said, she's a smart girl. I said, what do you mean? You might not think that a dog has a spirit or emotions, but Lacey does. That's why she is playing with you, because it makes her happy. Pretend you're going to throw your baby on the floor, Bam said. I grabbed Gabriel and pretended to throw her, and Lacey suddenly responded with a growl, as to warn me not to do it. Bam said if the city of Orion is a good city it will make Lacey happy. My thought was if Lacey was alive would she get a house in the city like they offered us? I said, I don't think Lacey is alive, but one thing that would utterly convince me that she is to paint an intelligent picture. Bam quickly got some paint and some paint brushes and brought them to Lacey. Paint daddy, Bam said. Lacey slowly painted a picture of what looked like a man. I could not believe it. Was I living a shallow life or did the surrounding world change very quickly? I began to fear that some of my past mistakes were a little bit worse than I made them out to be. Not everyone knows about this, Bam said. I never realized it, but Bam's dog Lacey was alive. I never thought outside of my world to consider what he was talking about when he would mention Lacey. I now wondered who created her, who programmed her, where did she come from? Bam said he was the father, but I brushed that off a long time ago. I said, Bam, I reconsider that you might have made sense all those times I didn't listen to you. Bam must have had ties to the city if I reconsider all the strange things, he told me. Bam, did the dog come from the city of Orion? I asked. If it did, it was me in the future, and I would have sent it back through some sort of portal to now, but then I would have to wonder how do I live in the future without my best friend, Bam answered. The future, I thought. Now that I had this talk with Bam, I feel like I have a greater knowledge. Maybe the spacemen were from the future, maybe they were sent here with good intentions. If they could travel through time, then they must have been watching us our whole lives, and maybe it was us living in the future who was watching us. Maybe the spacemen were sent here to give us the full reality of what we were to do on the Earth. What if Bam was telling the truth? What if Bam created Lacey and sent her here through a time machine? Later that day, Bam and I decided to go out and get something to eat, and afterwards we would go to the beach. We took Lacey with us. First stop was a fast food joint. I ordered a hamburger and Bam got pizza. As soon as Bam got his pizza, he asked Lacey if she wanted some. Lacey replied with a friendly bark. I realized Lacey was listening to him. She was just as alive as we were. Now I knew why Bam always referred to his dog whenever I talked about something paranormal, because there is nothing stranger than a dog who walks outside without shoes, but who listens and responds. Why did I not see it sooner? I think it was because I was so involved in how technology worked, that I never considered how the animals work. After lunch at the fast food joint, we went to the beach. I was eager to go. It was a hot day and a quick dip in the water would be nice. As I went into the water, Bam decided to play fetch with Lacey. Lacey ran back and forth returning the stick. I could not swim long, because I had to watch Gabriel, and not only watch her, but make sure she did not get overheated. It is too hot of a day to be out here, I thought as I got out of the water. I need to go home. Bam, we need to go back home, because Gabriel is not looking so good. I could not wait to get back to my air-conditioned apartment. Alice slowly opened the door to our apartment. Hi honey, she said. Hi, I replied. How was your day? She asks. I began to tell her about my day. Bam and I went to the beach and I studied his dog for the sake of Orion. I mentioned that the dog was smart, and concluded that in the ancient light of the Earth we cannot see everything. She seemed to pretend to know what I was talking about, but I knew she did not. I was trying to say she was smart, like City of Orion smart enough to have her own house within the city as a creature equal to humans, but if I said that I would have thought she would think I lost my mind. I had to discover the truth about this Earth. Why did we all get along in the city, but now think it was some sort of hallucination? I could no longer convince any of my friends that living in the city was a good thing. They were all trying to make money and sustain their hardships on Earth. Plus, I feared the creatures out there behind the night sky. I continued battling within myself, to tell myself it would all be alright, that they are not taking over, they most likely will not be back next year, or at least I began to hope they would not be. I knew that one of my main concerns with the city was, I had to vote it in. I had to wonder if I voted in the city would my family be at risk. Then a thought came to my mind, what if they had already known about the city and voted it in themselves? Then another thought popped into my head, what if they were from the future? I never considered these things before, and I think it was due to the light of the past. The light of the past dominated the Earth. I had to question some of my family, but my family and I rarely talk about such things, so it would be a challenge. I went to my parents. I said, Mom, Dad, what do you honestly think about all the strange things that have happened over the past couple of years? Things have been appearing out of thin air. Mom said the forest appeared out of thin air and you don't question that. People in this world have a variety of different opinions when it comes to the question. Some people believe the forest was put here by ancient ancestors, some think it was a powerful god, some think it was evolution. In anger I said, who do you think put it here? Dad said, legend has it that our dead ancestors kept living, and that life that they live is through the forest, so maybe the strange things you see are our ancient ancestors coming back and forth from the Earth. I was excited to hear that. Soon after the talk with my parents I jumped into my car and went home. On the way back to my apartment I had some powerful thoughts. First thought was, who put the forest there? I never considered the forest. I suppose that the light of the past never allowed me to fully see the forest in the light of the future. Maybe it was our ancestors. Suddenly I yelled, I got it. Our ancestors live in the city and come back and forth taking care of the forest. But how could they physically make the forest? The spacemen said that they were the ones controlling material things through words. Maybe the words they type are the things controlling the forest. Maybe they control the positive and the negative of the forest from within the city. I was excited to think these thoughts and quickly got home. Upon arriving, I noticed Alice cooking supper. "Hi honey, how was your day?" she asked. "I went to my parents to study the nature of things," I said. "What's the nature of things?" she replied. In uncertainty, I replied, "They made a good point about my question. They might have considered our ancient ancestors are the ones helping us out. I think they thought they might be helping us out, and they're doing that from within the city." "Honey, I have a confession to make. Before we together went to the city, I went there, and you were there, but not in this life. In other words, you were from the future. You were in a large building and you said that you created Gabriel and put her within me, or rather in my world per se, and wanted the both of us to raise it. The ancient ancestors that your parents might be talking about, might be living on the earth right now," she said. I could not believe what she had just said. I ran over to her and kissed her and told her that I loved her. That night I laid next to her wondering how, in the future, could I have created a baby and what would it be like to meet my future self. I drifted off to sleep and had a dream. I saw me working hard within a house that resided in the city of Orion. I could see me typing what looked like a computer program. My future self looked at me and explained that I made Gabriel, that I spent much time on her in the future as a daughter. I was told to keep it a secret just like Alice had. I told myself I would not tell a soul. The next morning, I woke up. Alice had already gotten up and went to work. As I walked into the kitchen, I smiled to myself. Knowing I had a daughter, I was happy. I sat down at the kitchen table and noticed a note. It was from Alice. She wrote, "Darling, last night I had a dream. I dreamt that we were living in the city, and we had many children. We had all these children, through patience and love. We got permission from the city to create living people. We live together and are wealthy. We live in a rich mansion that was created through wavelengths of all sorts. I love you and want us to always be together, but I want your heart to be in this, so do more research and discover yourself and what the light has done for you." I loved that letter. I kept it with me for the longest time. Although the letter gave me comfort, I could feel my humanity and I would not express the deep emotions within my heart. I had to get more answers. I stuffed the letter in my pocket, walked out the door, got into my car and went to work. My job at the paper mill was to put the glue on the paper. The glue held the paper fibers together. For the past few months, I worked alongside of a young man named Mike. All the employees called him Far Out Mike. I think it was because he acted like he was from another planet. On this day he started a conversation. "You have a glow about you today," he said. "I love my wife and child," I replied. "Being in love," he said, as thoughts moved through his mind. "Love comes from being home. Home makes you loved. I don't love here, only when I'm home." "Mike, you live out of a van," I replied. "That's not my home," he said. They were right. I thought he could be from another planet. But I was still wondering how he understood love. Later that evening as I was driving home from work, I started thinking about Far Out Mike. What if he were from another planet? I could not think about it at work. I was too busy. I should have asked him. I wonder what he would say. I wonder if he knew anything about Orion. In a hurry I turned the car around and drove back to the paper mill. I was hoping Mike had not left yet. I pulled in the driveway and noticed Mike's van still parked in the parking lot of the paper mill. He walked out the front doors. I opened my door and said, "Mike." "Yeah," he replied. "Earlier we talked about love. I wonder, have you ever had a home outside of this planet?" He laughed and said, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Nobody does, but my home is amongst the dead." "The dead? How is there any love amongst the dead?" I asked. "The dead is another word for others that are not from this earth," he replied and continued speaking. "This world is a virtual world, sort of like a video game." "I'm having a hard time believing that," I said. "If you ever do understand that, you will find home, with love attached," he said, as he opened the door to his van and drove off. I was glad he did. I had to get home before Alice started worrying. She tended to do that. As I drove home, I kept thinking about Alice, and her love for me, as well as my love for her. I recalled the letter and remembered I had to dig deep into my heart because I greatly feared this place, i.e., the earth would be the last place I would see her. Strange, I thought. I love her, but tend to believe we will be split up by leaving the earth. I could not let that happen. In my mind I was weak, and most of the time I just went with the flow, with little resistance, but then I reconsidered my situation and knew I needed to invest more time in my studies. "Alice," I said, as I opened the fridge and grabbed a snack, "what's for supper?" I waited all day hoping she was cooking pea soup. She made a great pea soup. It warmed me up on the inside and reminded me of cold winter's days with my parents. "Pea soup is on the stove," she graciously said. I grabbed a bowl of it and went into the living room and started explaining that I felt like I have been waiting for her my whole life, and the day finally came that I found love. She said, "I love you, and every time I look at our child, it reminds me of you, and I feel like the luckiest woman alive. I want to be with you." I then noticed we were not as close to each other as we could be. I think it was due to all the unanswered questions. I tried to explain to her that my heart was rooted in love for her. That night we lied in bed trying hard to get close to one another. We did the most intimate of things. We talked long into the night, and played like children, but I still felt that we were lying about our relationship. Only when I mentioned Gabriel did I feel close enough. I knew that if the dream of the future me was true, then I needed a bond of love to hold us together. The next morning, I happily watched her brush her teeth, comb her hair, and grab her car keys and go to work. She told me the night before that the job at the pet store was not paying enough and she wanted to go back to school. She wanted to study animals. Alice loved animals. She has a special bond with them. When she walks into the pet store, the animals calm down as if they know she is helping them. Her boss thinks she would make a great animal doctor. I got promoted at the paper mill and did not have to work as much. That meant more time with Gabriel. Alice could go to school if she wanted to, but I knew that would mean a lot of student loans. But everything requires money, so I encouraged her to go. Shortly after Gabriel turned 1 year of age, Alice started Sale University. She went there to study animals. The school was very expensive, $50,000 for a bachelor's degree in animal communications. Alice was not concerned. She was sure we could pay it back. It was fall when she started. All the leaves in Vermont were colored and were falling to the ground. I drove Alice to the first day of school. Once at the school, Alice got out of the car. I ran around the front of the car to wish her luck with a kiss. The fall breeze did the same. She grabbed her bag and told me she would be done around 8. As I drove back to our apartment, I could still see Alice's brown and purple highlighted hair blowing in the wind, her brown eyes looking into my eyes. I would from time to time get lost in her eyes, lost in her soul, feeling great love for her. I hoped she had the same feelings for me. I loved Alice, but I could not help thinking that we were being fake. Were we hiding our deepest secrets? Did she know that I had a strong sense of doubt and worry? The only time I did not feel the doubt is when I looked into her eyes. I wondered if she could see it in my eyes. I pulled Gabriel out of the car seat and said, "Sweetie, we are home." Gabriel giggled. A few months after Alice started Sale University, she withdrew herself from the awfully expensive school. I asked her what was wrong. She would insist everything was fine, but everything was not fine. She now just laid in bed. She had been there for 2 weeks. She even told her boss she was sick. I do not think she knew why she was acting that way. I knew that we owed a lot of money to the school and it was going to be tough to pay it back, but I would not mention my concern, hoping not to crush Alice, and like her I sort of did the same thing, insisted everything would be fine. Once Alice got out of bed, and went back to work, her boss allowed her to return to work. Life became normal again and she opened her personal reality with me. "This earth of this life is flawed," she started saying. "I think that's why I didn't finish school, because of the ultimate problem, and that is the problem. Besides, I did not fit in with the rest of the people. They are not where I want to be when I look at the big picture. I was not sick when I laid in bed, but protecting myself from the fake world, perhaps even a little depressed, although I do not believe such exists." She then kissed me and said, "I will have to try that again." Afterwards she began working and going about life normally. 5. An honest marriage. S. Shortly after Alice left Sale University, because of the wall of impossibilities, I was at work putting glue on the papers, while talking to far out mic. The conversation was about video games and technological advancements when suddenly one of the machines exploded due to overheating. Hot glue blasted in every direction, some hitting Mike and myself. Mike received third-degree burns all over his face. I had burns on my hands. Mike and I together cried out for help. The manager noticed and immediately called 911 as we lied crippled in pain on the floor. Flashes of memories began to play in my mind, laying on the floor, in fear, looking the unknown straight in the face. Alice, I thought, what if I do not see her again? What if I am damaged? I was in so much pain. My hands felt as if they were placed in extremely hot water, that they were on fire. I struggled to breathe. Shortly after the machine exploded, the ambulance arrived, and they did their best to take care of us. They put us in the ambulance as we cried in pain. On the way to the hospital, the emergency crew asked me if there was someone they could call. I gave them Alice's phone number. "Alice, this is NGRH. Maple has been in an accident and we think it best if you come to the hospital as soon as possible," the nurse said. "I will be there as soon as possible," replied Alice. Alice was so worried on the way to the hospital that she began to cry. Gabriel seemed to sense something was wrong. She was only one, but she could tell that Daddy had been hurt, and started crying herself. Within minutes they were at the hospital. Alice quickly grabbed Gabriel and placed her in her arms and ran into the hospital. She rushed to the nurse's station. "Where is Maple?" she yelled. "In room 112, the nurse replied. She found the room and darted over to me and hugged me and cried. "Honey, I'm glad you are okay." I lied in bed in pain as she wrapped her arms around me in the brightly lit hospital room. I said, "It will be all right, but the doctors said that I will not be able to go back to work for a few years. I cannot move my hands, and my face has some burns on it." "As long as you're alive, I am alive," she lovingly said. I was so happy to hear her voice. I felt a rush of ecstasy as she and Gabriel laid next to me. As I was feeling the love, the nurse walked in and gave me the opportunity to ask how Mike was. "How is Mike?" "If he makes it through the night, he most likely will need some skin grafts," the nurse said. That night the doctors let me go home. They told us that they would keep us updated regarding Mike. Over the next couple of weeks, Alice took care of my hands as well as all the burns. Alice stayed close by my side the whole time I was recovering. During the second week from the time the machine exploded, the doctors called and told us that Mike did not make it. Alice and I held one another trying to make sense of what did not make sense. Soon after the accident, I applied for workman's compensation. Within days I was approved. Alice and I were excited. We had money to live off, and not only that money, but the insurance company that represented the mill called us and told us that there might be some money for us and Mike's family. During the time of my recovery, Alice and I would take time to gaze into one another's eyes, and try to break down the wall that separated our relationship with one another, as well as Mike's separation from the earth. I had to wonder what would have happened if that had happened in another place, a place where Gabriel was. I knew I had to find answers. The city of Orion briefly entered my mind, but at this point I thought it was a dream of false expectations. The phone rang. I picked it up and said hello. "This is United Insurance. We have called to let you know that we sent out a check in the amount of $50,000. We hope the money will assist in your recovery." I was happy. I hung up the phone and ran over to Alice and yelled, "We got money." "How much?" Alice replied. $50,000. It's coming from the insurance company of the paper mill. They want to cover the damage caused by the machine," I said. She looked into my eyes. As I looked back into her eyes, she started saying, "The money doesn't pay for the damage done. The money would not have paid if I lost you. I do not know what I would have done if I lost you. How could I ever love again?" As I was looking into her beautiful eyes, I knew that I must marry her again. The first time I did so as a friend, but this time I wanted to be with her as a lover, and that would mean breaking down the wall between us. "Alice, let's have another wedding, a big expensive wedding. It will be a party wedding. We can invite Mike's family and all of our family. It will be sort of like a fairy tale wedding, one that we both will fall in love with," I said. "I do not know. What about money for the baby?" she answered. "We'll have money for the baby, but first thing is first, and that is the love we have for one another," I said. She smiled and softly said, "Okay." I told my mom we wanted another wedding. She was surprised, but was excited to help. She knew that the first wedding could have been better, and now we had the money to do it. Asterisk. The big day had come. I had not seen Alice in 24 hours. The night before, I was at Brendon's apartment. Him and Bam gave me a night before wedding celebration party. The first sight of Alice in her expensive, beautiful wedding dress was like first sight of a new forest. Soft streams of light pour in from the treetops above, spacious, desirous, and homelike, safe and playful. Her hair radiated youth. Her eyes said love. I was left wondering what I did so well in life that I am marrying her. The wedding was huge. We had flower girls, cake, music, banners, and best of all, friends and family. My mom had decided the best place for the marriage was in the KDF recreational building. It was the only place that we could fit all the people. The whole wedding cost $40,000 and every penny was well spent. Just to rent the KDF recreational building was $5,000. It included the downstairs mesh hall. "You may kiss the bride," was the words I heard as I slowly moved forward to kiss Alice. This time I marry her with a heart knit together with hers to form one. Suddenly there was a strong applause from inside the building. I smiled at Alice. She smiled back. Afterwards we all rushed downstairs to rest. Downstairs, after the ceremony was over, we gathered to spend time with our friends and family, and as I could not help but notice Mike's mom. If there was one thing I wanted to do today, it was to fix the missing in my life. Talking to her would be a source of closure for the accident. "Mike was a good friend," I said. "He still is a good friend," she replied. I could remember how he said that his home was amongst the dead. I considered for a moment that he must be home, and his mother is home with him. Far out Mike's home was far out, and I had to take it to heart to deal with all the unanswered questions. The entire conversation, his mom stared into my eyes with confidence that her child was home. Mike's brother noticed us talking, and walked over. He congratulated me on finding such a beautiful young lady. Thanks, I replied. Mike was a good friend, and that is why I wanted you both here to honor his life. He was a good brother, Mike's brother said, as a tear formed in his eye as well as his mother's. I gave them both a hug, and quickly changed the subject. I walked over to Alice and wrapped my arms around her and said, I love you. She looked into my eyes and said, I love you too. She was standing by the wedding cake and cut herself a piece. She offered me some, and although I did not care to have cake now, I knew that if she offered it, it was no longer cake, it was affection. Brendon walked up and said, these are the moments, these are the things that one buries within the heart to relive repeatedly. Brendon was like that. He cared not just for the special moments, but odd things like lint, bugs, dust. He continued speaking, love for another is something only few find, and you have found it. I doubt myself to have ever gone to Orion without you, I said. I wish you had gone to the city, Brendon. Now I wonder if I should have ever gone without your approval. If you had been there you could have helped me out, and supported inviting in a new thing. We spent what seemed like days there. They are coming back in little under a year, and I have not put any other pieces together. As of right now I do not trust them. Maple will figure it out, Alice said. The city is a good city, Brendon, but I think Maple still wishes you were there, to help with morality. You would have been great support for Maple understanding what you do about such teeniness, bugs, dust, lint, etc. Alice said. Bam walked over and asked, what are you talking about? Where I was not, Brendon answered with a small amount of regret in his voice. The city of Orion. Bam concludingly said, it was wonderful, the gold, the colors, yet fearful aliens, and stronger creatures. You should have been there, Bam said. I think I know what it looks like, Brendon started saying. My parents took me inside of what appeared to be a ship. They told me it was the traveling ship of our ancient ancestors, and that it was time for me to grasp life. I was taken to different places, some that looked like gardens with huge colorful fruit, other places had structures made of shiny plates or something, like ancient buildings, something you might find on the earth in an ancient ruin. I sort of wanted to long time build one of these places. Alice questioned, I wonder if that is the same place as we went. Brendon added, I am jealous of you because you might have been in another place. Bam, we should go back to your portal. I will go in by myself. If I go in, I can help Maple, as well as you all, and I will no longer feel excluded. After the wedding, we will, Bam replied. Max and Brenda walked over. Brenda says, hey, you two lovebirds, what made you two marry a second time? Max and I cannot get married the first time. I answer, we ran into some extra money and I wanted our wedding to have a deeper meaning. We talked throughout the night, and after all the guests were gone, Alice and I sat next to each other talking and feeling love for one another. This day could not have been better, I said. Alice gave a girlish smile and a silent giggle. I love you, I said, and hope this wedding will put an end to the wall between us, as well as the wall that keeps us from a deeper reality. When I was a child, she started to explain, I always wanted to live in a ghost town, that way no one would know that I exist, to give me reason. If there were ghosts around, they would tell me that the reason is to play games. I think I know what you mean, sort of like Halloween, the games, the candy, what could be better, I agreeingly said. We laughed and got into our honeymoon car. A sign in the back window said, just married. Meanwhile, after the wedding, Bam, Max, and Brendon went to the portal. Bam questioned Brendon and said, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I need to help out Maple. Brendon answered. 6. Self-discovery. M. Axe, Bam and Brendon were suddenly in the middle of a huge garden. Fruit trees were everywhere. Strange fruit. The men looked at one another as they examined the strange-looking fruit. Humming computer-like sounds filled the forest. Every few seconds we would hear a beep as if my cell phone notified me of a new text. Max said, I've never seen fruit like this. As they looked at the trees, Max found his hand slowly grab a giant orange-colored piece of fruit. I wonder if I should take a bite. he thought, as he hears in the distance Bam say, "Take a bite." "That's great," Max said, as he chewed on an odd-shaped chunk of fruit. He seemed fine to eat, and because of that the nerves of the three calmed down. Brendon looked back to see the portal, wondering if they should be there, or if they should go any further. The smell of the air had them wondering what this strange place was. The garden seemed as if it was planted by something foreign to the earth, possibly a creature that was stronger than the three men. Bird calls could be heard throughout the forest, as the men explored. Max was eating the fruit. The watery sound of each bite made Bam hungry, very hungry. The hunger drove him to quickly grab a piece of fruit and stuff it in his mouth. Brendon noticed fruit juice spraying in all directions as Bam bit into the juicy cherry fruit and said, "That is the biggest cherry I have ever seen in my life." All became hungry and ate. After all was full, the smell in the air caught up with the men and caused them not to talk much. The smell in the air was not of the earth and was very heavy, which caused their blood streams to slow down. Brendon had mentioned earlier that his parents said, the playful earth smell is due to global warming, too much gasoline being burned. His father explained to him, so we are in a place that is greater, in my opinion, than the earth, greater being more powerful. As the men slowly walked deeper into the garden they began to sweat. The air was hot and humid. They pushed through the foliage of the strange vegetation. Brendon quietly mumbled, "What is this place?" as each looked at stones which appeared to be done by another person. Bam said, "This was not here when we came through the first time." Max, quick to answer, said, "Maybe the spacemen redirected the portal." Bam said, "Maybe they did not expect us to go through a second time." Brendon had to find answers for himself. He needed to stay, and quickly jumped at the chance to make an excuse to go further, explaining to the others that they were embarking on a great mission. As he put his hand to move a branch from his view, he could see what appeared to be a half-clothed girl. It did not appear to be a child, but a woman, a young woman. She was hiding in the foliage. "Quiet," Brendon said. "We don't want to scare her." Brendon felt the need to communicate and said hello. The lady looked at the three men and with a glow on her face, she walked toward the three men. She was beautiful. Her skin shined. She was exposing a lot because of the outfit she was wearing. Her skin radiated youth and health as a freshly painted house would or a wild horse in a forest. As she walked toward us, she stuck out her hand and grabbed Brendon's to say, "Follow me." She was beautiful. Brendon immediately fell in love. Brown hair and blue eyes made Brendon smile like a child. The girl seemed to be a safe person and the three did not sense any fear around her, but they could tell she was another type of creature. They walked with the girl as she led the way. Suddenly a waterfall came into view. The men could make out other girls sitting and playing next to the waterfall. They looked the same as the first, beautiful. The girls noticed the men walking and rushed toward them. One of the girls walked up to Brendon and said, "Hello, Brendon." Brendon said, "How do you know my name?" The girls seemed to give themselves to Brendon as if they were already his. "My name is Brika." The others started giggling. "You created us." Brendon was confused. "Brika," the woman holding Brendon's hand said, "if you choose to live in the city, in the future you will create all of what you see." Brendon thought that was weird. Were they or were they not created? The girls started calling him creator. Bam and Max knew he was not the creator. "Choose to create us, Brendon," the girls said. Brika grabbed Brendon's arm and led him deeper into the garden. He could smell the smell of fresh plants and exotic fruit. Out of the garden appeared a temple. Brika led the three men inside. Brika started moving the stones around, and holograms started appearing. The girls showed and taught Brendon a lot. After these things, Brika once again moved the stones and said, "I hope you choose to create us, Brendon," while smiling and laughing. Then she ran out of the temple. "Do you believe that?" Brendon said to Max and Bam. "That was similar to what the spacemen showed us," Bam replied. "We wanted to stay longer, but the spacemen came and decided to take us to another location." In the spaceship, the three told the spacemen that Brendon wanted to see the city. The spacemen were happy to show him around. They took us to a city that resembled New York City. There were other humans walking around and coming and going from the skyscrapers. We would have thought we were back on Earth, but the spacemen assured us that this place was within the city of Orion. The Earth-like city seemed to be within some sort of dome. There were not clouds or a sky. The sky stopped right above the skyscrapers. The spacemen took us inside one of the buildings and led us to some offices with people at desks, and they were typing. Brendon asked, "What are they doing?" The spacemen said, "They are making energy for the city." Brendon was curious and asked, "What were they typing?" The spacemen said, "The finger that presses the keys makes energy, so they type whatever they want, but remember whatever is typed is analyzed. If they type words or sentences, the energy is purer and in turn will make more money than if they had just pressed a bunch of keys. Brendon was excited. He thought it was a great way to make money. He fell in love with the system within the city. He looked at the spacemen and said, "There must be a law within your or our universe that says humans' love and work can produce something of value." The spacemen said, "Yes, your work within the city or your love within the city activate an ancient law, like growth for EXP, the law to growth. Laws like that hold together our city, that is why we pay our citizens money to work and live here." Max, Brendon, and Bam loved the city at the time. While they were in the city, they continued smiling and looking at one another as if they were children all over again, but deep within themselves they knew that they must go back to the Earth. A moment later and the three men were led into a kitchen. They noticed chairs and tables. They sat down. They were offered donuts. The spacemen said, "The people within the city created the donuts." The donuts looked delicious. They appeared to not have been baked, but created, like with colored paper. Bam carefully took a bite. Brendon did likewise. "They taste full of cinnamon and strawberries," they exclaimed. "We have to go perform a task, but we will be back. Enjoy the food," the spaceman said. As Brendon was eating his donut, he opened up to Max and Bam about his childhood. He started saying, "I have had this feeling before, the feeling I have within the city. When I was in 5th grade, I fell in love with a girl who just moved to the area. That whole year we never left one another's side. I thought we would be together forever, but at the end of the year her parents moved her south because they had to be closer to a good hospital, a type of hospital that could treat her kind of cancer. I was sad, but I knew that we still could write to one another. Not soon after my parents told me that she went away, I thought I knew what that meant. I cried and cried knowing I would never see her again. One day my parents noticed me crying and told me that she was in a good place. I did not believe my mom at the time, but as life went on my parents kept assuring me that I could not see behind the night sky. After you two went into the portal, after I abandoned you, my parents took me to a laboratory, and there the doctor put me into a trance. In the trance I felt as if I was in real life, and that is where I saw Kylie, the girl I fell in love with in 5th grade. I was not dreaming. When the doctor woke me up, they looked at me with authority, and that is when I knew not to trust what appeared to be, and that is where I would find Kylie, and that is where I would find love." Max said, "Brendon, you're tough for going through that, but why did you not come with us when looking for the answers?" Brendon said, "My parents wanted me to live their experience, so that we had a bond, and that a bond of love, but that did not mean I forsook you. That is why I had to come this time. I had to be part of my friends." Bam said, "You got to do what you got to do." "When I was young," Bam explained, "it was all about the animals. My mom and dad were convinced that they came from another world, as if they were dropped off by another life form. I treat my dog as if she has come from another world. My mom and dad says originally dogs started out on a planet named Goes, but the higher level creatures decided people should have them too because they were compassionate. I never believed that they did come from another world, but I do believe my dog is extremely smart, and I have noticed other people's pets and they're extremely smart as well. Now that we are in the city, I believe that our pets as well as other animals, possibly came from the city, Orion." Brendon asked Bam, "Do you think you create your dog in the future, as Brendon might have created Brika, or Maple created Gabriel?" "Maybe Brendon, but here, anything seems possible, but once back on the Earth it might seem a little crazy. My parents were talked badly about for years about telling me their beliefs on animals. It's something people rarely talk about on the Earth." In the conversation Max said, "Like you too, I have had some strange things happen to me. When I was in 6th grade, I became friends with a boy named Todd. We became best friends. One day his parents decided to take him camping, and we, the two of us being best friends, went together. On the drive to Hamgan campgrounds, a car going fast hit us head on. Todd at the time was not wearing a seat belt, and you can finish the rest on your own. I had some minor injuries, but the pain I felt was unbearable. It changed me as a person. I was no longer able to see through my 6th grade eyes. I saw through the eyes of misfortune. To make a long story short, Todd's parents told me I would see Todd again, sort of like a ghost or something. That did not make sense to me, so I never checked to see what happened to Todd or if Todd was still living in his parents' house, sort of like a ghost. Now that I'm in the city, my mind is open to the idea that he could have been coming and going from the Earth just as we are now." The spacemen walked into the room and interrupted us. "We could sense you would have had this conversation, and we went and contacted Todd. He would love for you and us to go and see him." Wow, Max said, "I haven't seen Todd in 8 years. Come," the spacemen commanded. "The ship is waiting for us." They went into the ship and pressed forward to see what happened to Todd. Max wondered if he still looked the same. The ship was traveling at the speed of light and it still took a couple of hours to reach our destination. Hours later we reached a jungle area. It resembled Madagascar of the Indian Ocean or of the jungles of South America. As soon as we got off the ship, Todd came running up to us and said, "Long time no see, I have been trying to contact you but living here has made that difficult." Max knew it was Todd. He could tell it was him, because of the way he assembled his words. Max cried a little. "Do you just live here alone in these woods?" Max asked. "Sort of," Todd replied. "There are buildings further that way," Todd said, pointing into the forest. "The environment is so much different from the earth. The forest plants almost look plastic," Max said. Bam added, "That is most likely how the city keeps the forest from being destroyed." "Exactly," Todd says. "At first it was strange living here. I was as a child all over again, but now I love it, and enjoy being positive." We looked around his woods, his jungle, marveling at the amount of wealth surrounding us, giving us feelings of being far out into the unknown, deep, dark space of the universe. It appeared as if his forest was made from toys, or rather a theater or mall display, plastic parts. It was safe and nothing could harm him out here. "I want to live here," Max said. "This is incredible. I would have never thought one could live here far out in outer space," Brendon said, full of wonder. The men now wondering if this were real or was this somehow fake. Brendon wanted to live with the girls, and Max could tell Todd was Todd and wanted to stay. Bam was a little spooked and reminded us that we must go back to the earth, and on earth we will not feel the same. After the time with Todd, the men went back to the earth, back to Bam's bedroom. "7. What is the earth? T. He marriage and honeymoon were over, and we had to go on living our lives. Alice must go back to work. I had to take care of Gabriel. The first day back in our little cozy apartment, furnished with all our belongings, Brendon ran up to our second-floor apartment and knocked on the door. 3 hard knocks. I wondered who this could be. Rarely do I or Alice get company. I walked over to the door, opened it up, and to my surprise it was Brendon. Brendon looked like he had a lot on his mind. I said, "How's it going?" and slowly took a sip of coffee from my coffee mug. "Max, Bam and I went through the portal. I cannot believe that place actually exists," Brendon said. I began preparing myself for a long conversation. Brendon said, "I don't believe it happened now that I am on the earth, but it was just as real as this world." "Did they tell you that they wanted your vote? They wanted your vote to take over the earth?" I asked. "Yes, something like that," Brendon said. "Do you vote for them?" I asked. Brendon said, "That is the same world that my parents introduced me to, but this time it was on a much larger scale." "Did you like them?" I asked. There I felt in love, but now I am filled with fear, but I still like the city very much. Brendon said, and continued, "I watched this hologram Brika showed me." "Wait," I said, "who is Brika?" "Brika, a woman living in the city. Brika said in the future I create her sort of like one could create a son or daughter." The hologram explained how I could have created her as well as the environment that they were living in. I was excited. Brendon took a breath of air and said, "When we went to the city, we went to a part of the city that resembled Earth. We went into one of the large buildings and saw the people making money that can be used on themselves. The spacemen told me if I were to live in the city I could work from home or go to such public places to work. If I were to type in public I could socialize and motivate the universe, but if I were to stay home that would be great too. There was so much to the city. I did see what appeared to be ballparks, food joints, people, movie theaters. There could be a lot to do within the city, if you do not mind heavy blood," Brendon said, sort of laughing, mocking artificial gravity. I asked, "Did you figure out how you made Brika?" "Yes, I did," Brendon said, chuckling. "It took a long time. And once Brika was mature she too had the option to live in the city," Brendon added. As we were talking at the kitchen table, I heard Alice's key unlock the door. "That must be Alice," I said. She opened the door and walked into the kitchen and noticed Brendon and said, "Hi, Brendon." Brendon said hi and explained that it was getting late and he needed to be heading home. Still excited about my conversation with Brendon, I said to Alice, "Brendon went to the city. They showed him things he would create in the future. They showed him his children from beyond, just as they showed us Gabriel," I said. Alice said, The city told me that it is hard to find a partner, but I found you. The universe knew I needed you and they have been guiding me to you. Gabriel is your child, and we will be a family. I love you. Alice said, warming up the environment. I love you too, but you have to admit the feelings between us could be more. We need to get closer. I still feel as if we are living in separate houses, I said. Alice said, I feel close to you. The only thing that separates you is the desire for the earth. I have looked into your eyes, but I do not see love. I have seen your future and you're full of love. Sometimes I think you doubt Gabriel. It's not that I doubt Gabriel, it's that the experience doesn't feel like the earth. Only when I was in the city did all things feel comfortable when it comes to not doubting Gabriel. As I was saying this, I started thinking about my own birth. Was I born in a natural way? I looked Alice in the eyes and said, if you truly believe in Gabriel, then I will truly believe that I have been living a lie, that I'm the lie, but right now I can't be a lie, Alice. I have too much that I love about myself and the earth, I said. Alice could sense I was hiding the wall that separated the earth from Orion. She seeing that gave me a childlike hug and said, I love you and I always will. After our conversation, I decided to get out of the house and go for a drive. Watching Gabriel 24/7 had me feeling as if I was stuck in the mountains in the middle of winter. It was sunny outside. I got excited as I noticed the sunlight bouncing off my car. Life will get better, I thought. I pulled out of the driveway, gladly received all the sun I could. As I was driving, the thought came back to my mind that I had earlier while talking to Alice. Did I come from the city? I considered going to my parents and asking them, but even if I had gone to my parents, I could not find the words to ask the question. I had to find answers, but where do I turn? Bam. I could at least go talk to him, I answered. Knock. Knock on Bam's front door. I hear Bam's footsteps. Good, he is home, I mumbled. He turned the door handle and greeted me with a friendly hello. Hi Bam, I need someone to talk to, I said. You can always talk to me, he replied. Childbirth, I began to say. Did you ever wonder who created you and where were they when they did? Bam started saying there are many answers to that question. Let us bring out the possibilities. Gods of love, the sun god, our parents, childbearing gods, or the place where my dog could have come from, the bird. Which one gave life? My parents, I replied. Your parents must have been powerful gods. Bam said. Would that mean I came from Orion? I asked. I am glad you asked that question because I'm still excited about Brendon and our adventure into the city. This time when we were there, girls appeared, and they insisted that Brendon created them despite that fact that he hadn't yet, Bam said. Do you think Brendon was created in the city? I asked. They took him to the city before we did. I think Brendon was created from within the city, Bam said. I said, I still do not believe it, Bam. I need to hear it from my parents, and not only do I need to hear it, but I also need to believe it. How am I supposed to give Gabriel life when everything about this is wrong? Babies do not just appear on one's living room floor, I demanded. Remember the time when we were in Florida, the summer Alice wanted us to spend with her, at the time she wanted you to play the father. Bam said. Then he looked at me and mumbled maybe it was a test. What kind of test? I asked. A test of fate, Bam replied. If you had not played the father, it would have been an allusion to what Alice thought she saw in the city. Maybe Alice is struggling with this too. Not to change the topic, but when my parents came to me with Lacey and told me she was mine, that is all I needed to hear. The time is mine. There is not any other answer, Bam explained. I have to go see my parents, I said. Thanks, Bam. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, midsummer, when I jumped into the car. It felt good to be out of the house. I turned on the radio, and a rock classic was playing on the radio. Life is good, I thought to myself. I opened the door to my parents' house. Mom, Dad, I yelled. In the kitchen, Mom said, I'm getting supper ready, are you hungry? No, I replied. Alice is cooking. This will not take long. Glad to hear you, Dad said upon entering the kitchen. I need your help in the garage. He needed help moving a heavy engine part from his car. I was happy to help. After all, I was there to get answers and I was not sure how I would get it. See that giant piece of metal over there pointing to the back of the garage? We're going to move that inside the car, my dad said. Something about this did not feel right. My dad started bending over, but it was not next to the metal. Dad. I yelled. Immediately I knew something was wrong. I had to get help. I went on the inside and yelled, call 911. Not long after the ambulance came, he was gone. My mother was devastated. After the ambulance left, I tried to comfort my mom, but she just wanted me to be okay. I slowly left her house looking down at my burnt up hands and arms and started crying as I got into my car. I did not find the answers I was looking for, and the man I looked up to the most was gone. I would have called Alice and told her what had happened, but I knew I needed to see her. With tears in my eyes, I unlocked the door to my apartment, helpless, hopeless, and hating existence. "Honey, I'm glad your home supper has been ready for hours." It was the voice of Alice. She walked into the living room where I was sitting and noticed the tears in my eyes. "What happened?" she asked. "My dad had a heart attack, and is gone," I said, holding back a flood of tears. Alice looked at me puzzled. As she was fighting off reality, she did the best thing she knew how, and that was to wrap her arms around me. I hear her soft voice say, "It is going to be all right." That night I did not sleep much. I could not imagine a world without my dad. The little love I had in my heart vanished. The only thing that remained was Alice. As her body laid next to mine, I knew I would not survive this moment without her. The next morning the phone rang. I slowly walked over to it and picked it up. I was hoping it was not going to be any more bad news. "Sweetheart, it's Mom. I've prepared a gathering tomorrow at 10 in the morning. It will be a remembrance ceremony. I have let everyone in the family know." Then she hung up the phone. I did not know how to feel. I was like a child all over again. I kept thinking the only thing I understand is that I do not understand. Asterisk. "Gabriel, smile, smile for me," I said as Alice was getting ready for the gathering. "We got to hurry, Alice, it's almost 10, I said. We quickly got into the car and drove to the funeral home where my father laid. Uncles, aunts, grandparents, and friends were all there. Alice and I were the last to arrive. As we slowly walked to the open box where my father laid, I could hear crying and relatives saying their goodbyes. Alice started crying and asked me if we should go any further, if I was going to be okay. "Yes, I will be fine," I replied. I could not believe he was gone. I looked at the man, my father, dressed up, lying there with a peaceful look on his face. A black suit covered his body, and his eyes were shut as if he was sleeping. 2 days ago, that man was full of life. How could his heart have given out? I quietly said, "Goodbye, Dad, I love you," and looked at Alice and said, "This place is a sad place, Alice. Let's go home." As we drove home we were silent. A country song played on the radio. Alice loved country. Right before we pulled in our driveway, Alice said, "I'm sick." I said, "We're home." "No, I'm really sick," she said. "Should I take you to the hospital?" I said, worrying. "Yes," she whispered. I drove to the hospital as fast as I could, hoping she was not going to die. As I drove, all I could think about was losing Alice. I was panicking. I could not restrain the nerves in my body and started expressing fear, all the while hoping Alice would not notice. The whole drive I thought I was going to faint. I do not know what held me up that day, but the pain I was in was unbearable. Once we got to the hospital, I ran inside. "Help, help," I said. "My wife is sick. She is in my car." The nurse quickly got help and rushed Alice into the emergency room. A half hour later the doctors came out of Alice's room, and came into the waiting room where I was waiting to hear the news. One of the doctors said, "Alice is going to be fine. She had a minor heart attack. We are going to have to keep her for a few days for observation." I quickly called up Alice's parents as well as Brenda, Max, and Bam. They all rushed to the hospital. Bam was the first to arrive. "Alice," Bam said. "She can't talk, Bam," I said. Alice interrupted. "I can talk," she said while holding Gabriel. Alice's parents quickly showed up and ran into the room that Alice was staying in. Her mom asked, "Alice, are you okay? You had us worrying." Soon Brenda showed up. Not soon after Brendon showed up, they both hugged Alice and comforted her. We all hung out with Alice for what seemed to be days. Once we were sure everything was all right, we too returned home. I had to take Gabriel home. This had been a long day for her. Bam and Max decided to follow me home. They wanted to help me through my father's death. Brenda stayed with Alice, lying in bed with her. Max and Brendon got beer. They planned on spending the night at my place. I knew I could not drink, because I had to watch Gabriel, but I did get some Tylenol. My head was pounding. After Max had a few beers and the food we ordered came, Max opened up about Todd. I think he was trying to help. He started saying, "I know you might not know this, because you moved to the area in 8th grade. Before you came to the school, I had a best friend. His name was Todd. Todd and I were close. We did everything together. One day when his parents decided to take us camping, we got into a car accident, and he vanished. His parents said he still was around, but nobody ever saw him, but they insisted he lived in their house, but it was not like before. I do not know what I had been thinking now that I have seen him in the city, how I could have not seen him all those years. He seemed perfectly fine. Max answers himself, because I did not keep him alive within my heart. I could no longer see him, and so I went on living in the ancient light of the earth, without Todd. But after Brendon and I went to the city a second time and I saw Todd there, he began to live within my heart again. Although I live on the earth in doubt because of the ancient light that surrounds me, I can keep his memory alive. Brendon, you must have seen and felt the love when we saw Todd, seen and felt the love and possibilities of worlds and lands, not of the earth when we saw Todd, as if our present knowledge, the knowledge of what our leaders have, was only part of a bigger, much bigger world, without they even knowing about it. Max added. Yes, I did. I'm still in love with the garden and the girls I saw. I hope to create them, although I follow the routine of the earth. But I doubt how I could have a home in the city, and I wonder if the girls that I saw were my creation, rather the nothing of darkness and unanswered questions. Brendon answered. Max, do you think my father is now living in that city? I asked. Yes, I do, because children can only be created through powerful people, and powerful people don't have a heart attack. Max answered. Remember, whatever is on the earth is living in the past light of the stars that shined here billions upon billions of years ago. What we see here is unfinished, Max explained. I had small ideas of what they were talking about but could not get my mind to think anything but my experience upon the earth. When I was growing, I embraced the life as it was, not as the future of greatness. I had to admit to myself I held on to my father's heart attack as the solution and answer. The next morning, upon waking up, I noticed Brendon and Max were gone. Beer cans were everywhere. I investigated Gabriel's crib, happy to see her lying there. I bent over and picked her up. She was a happy baby. I placed her in my arms, brought her to my face and kissed her. I knew by her giggle that she needed something to eat. I grabbed a bottle that Alice placed in the fridge yesterday and started feeding Gabriel. What am I going to do this day, I thought while listening to Gabriel's mouth gently sucking on her bottle. I knew we had to go see Alice, but before we did, I needed to see my mom. It was still early in the morning, 6 o'clock. I got Gabriel dressed up and drove 5 miles to my mom's house. Mom, I said as I opened the front door to her house. I'm in here, dear, she said. She was still in bed. That is unusual for her. Most of the time she is dressed up and ready for the day by 4. My mom and dad were always early birds. They were that way since I was born. They had to be ready for anything at any time. Do you mind company? I asked as I grabbed a kitchen chair and placed it next to my mom's bed. Gabriel won, I said. I unfastened her from her car seat and placed her in my mother's arms. My mother gazed into her eyes and said, she has the same eyes as you. That's what Alice says too, I replied. A noise sounded in the bathroom. It sounded like the shower running. Mom, is someone here? I asked. Yes, it's your Aunt Betty. She will be staying here for a couple of days, she said. The shower quickly turned back off and then I heard Aunt Betty say there is not any hot water. She came out of the bathroom, came into the bedroom, and sat at the edge of the bed. Kathy and Bill are the names of my parents. Kathy, Betty said, what are we going to do about the hot water? Bill would have known, he was always good with things like that, my mom said and started crying. Betty said, he's still around, he just went home. I want to go home too, Kathy replied. Home is where your son is, he needs you, Kathy, Betty said. I wanted to ask Betty what home meant, but I could not find the words. As they were talking, I got lost in my thoughts. I started thinking about the earth and what I thought of the earth. I considered that I accepted the earth as it was. Now that I went to Orion, I could not help but wonder why I felt as if the earth could be a lie. My father could not be gone, but I know that he is not here. Why would Aunt Betty say he went home? People have used that phrase my whole life, but did I truly know the meaning? As I was deep into my thoughts, I could hear my mom say, Maple, will you go check on the hot water tank? Aunt Betty needs a shower. Yes, sure, I replied. I gazed over at Gabriel knowing she was in loving arms and went down to the basement. For some strange reason, as I was walking down the steps to the basement, I started sensing my dad. I almost wanted to say Dad, but I was unsure what would happen if I heard him say something back. If he was in the basement, it was not something I was ready to deal with. I found the circuit breaker and flipped it on and off and the hot water tank turned on. Good, that must have been the problem. Now Betty can take a shower. I quickly ran up the stairs, shut the door and noticed the shower running. Betty must have heard the hot water tank turn on. Thank you, dear, my mom said, upon entering her room. Mom, are you going to be all right? I said, knowing I had to leave and go see Alice. I will be all right as long as I know you're alive, she answered. I had so many questions to ask, but I could not find the words, so I kissed my mom on the forehead, placed Gabriel in her car seat and went to see Alice. I got to the hospital at 8 in the morning. Morning dew was still on the ground and a chill was in the air. I walked into the hospital wondering what room they put Alice in. I decided to ask a nurse, which room is Alice Bark in? 305, the friendly nurse replied. I gently knocked on the door. I could hear Alice say, "Come on in." "Alice, how are you doing?" I asked. "I have great news. The doctors are going to let me go home today, but they advised me not to go back to work for a while," she answered. I brought Alice home that morning. Once home, she agreed to stay in bed. "I love you," Alice said as we were eating lunch. "I love you too, and I do not know what I would do without you. I would blame you for the minor heart attack, but I know it was not your fault and there was nothing you could have done about it," I said. "We live in the city," she replied, meaning in the future we live together. When she said that, her face lit up. I could see the child within her. I could remember what she said about how hard it was for the city to find her a mate. As her face glowed, I could not help but to continue to look in her eyes and wonder what life would be like behind the night sky. She wants me, I thought. She wants me to be with her, not on the earth. Although we were on the earth together, she wanted me as a soul mate, a mate that existed in the city. Although I never considered it until now, she did not want the earth mate, she wanted someone who could make Gabriel with her. As I was looking into her eyes, I could not help but fall in love with her childlike characteristics. We talked until evening, and as she fell asleep I decided to take a journey to the cabin we rented when we were younger, the cabin that we noticed a strong force communicating with us. It was abandoned now. I could easily get on the inside. A quick drive and I was there. I looked up at the stars. I looked at the same spot we saw the light blink. Just a few months prior to that I met Alice. It was freshman year. Strange things were happening throughout the country. The cell phone age had begun. Nothing ever came out of it. I suppose my parents were right when they pushed it off as a normal occurrence. I looked up in the night sky wondering if the light would blink, but it did not. I went into the cabin we rented years ago. It still smelled and looked the same, except the wall opposite of the lake had begun to fall. I could remember Alice, Bam, Max, and Brendon all making energy to communicate with the strange force that had consumed America. As I reflected on the good times I had, I could hear someone outside. I opened the door to see who or what it could be. As I opened the door, I could make out a man coming out of the bushes. At first, I thought it was Far Out Mike. It looked like him, but it could not have been because I would see the scars on his face. "Hello," I said. "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night?" I asked, trying to convince the man I had a purpose to be at the camp covering up my doings. "Looking for company," the man said. "You're the guy who got hurt at the paper mill explosion," he said, looking down at my hands, at my scars. "That was me. How do you know?" I asked. "I saw the scars on your hands and put two and two together," he answered. "Do you want to go for a swim?" I asked. "Yes," he said, looking for an adventure. I put my toes into the water to check out the temperature. I was reluctant to go in. There was a cold, heavy breeze coming from the distant forest. But not for Mike, he jumped right in. I followed Mike's example and got into the water. The icy water almost made me cry out, but I covered it up. Mike swam over to me to push my head under the water. We both laughed. He acted and talked like Far Out Mike, but it could not be unless the earth was no longer the earth I grew up on. Everything around me expressed it was just another man at the beach. All at the beach was convincingly pleasant. Midsummer Beach convincingly pleasant. "You seem like another guy I know. His name is Mike as well," I said. Mike gave me a puzzled look and said, "Maybe it was in another life." "Okay, the water is a bit too cold for swimming," I said, and we swam back to shore. After the swim, Mike invited me back to his camp. He then offered me some food. We ate and talked to almost 10 o'clock. I knew I had to get home. "I have to get home, Mike," I said. He said, "In another life," as I walked to my car and drove off. "Alice, I am home," I said. Alice must be sleeping, I thought. I saw Gabriel lying in her crib. She had a smile on her face and started babbling as she moved her arms and legs. I walked into the bedroom and noticed Alice open her eyes. I said, "I just saw the strangest thing happen. I went for a swim with a guy named Mike. He looked and talked just like the Mike who I was working with when the machine exploded." "Then it was Mike," she said. No, it could not have been. Everything around expressed who it was. Even my own body would not accept a Mike, without the scars on his face or some reason for the entire lack, I said. She replied, "Why don't you write down everything that you don't accept about the reality to Orion?" As I was about to say no. Alice added, seriously, because that was probably Mike from within the city, but you just do not trust it being in love with the past light of the earth. As you do that, I will work harder at being your wife, Alice said, picking up a notebook and handing it to me. Eight. The child, the question. T. At night after swimming with Mike and talking with Alice, I wanted to explore my reality, versus the reality of Orion. I wanted to find out what the wall was that separated Alice and me. I decided to take Alice's advice and write down things I greatly care about, especially the earth. As I started writing, I went deep into my thoughts. I could remember my parents homeschooling me until 3rd grade. I could not remember being a toddler, but I could remember watching cartoons as my mother lovingly placed me on the couch and told me she would be right back. She left the house for a moment as my father slept. I was wrapped in a blanket on the couch as the cartoons played. It was a very pleasurable experience. At that age of about 4, the cartoons were so pleasant, I started asking questions. Where was I from, and how would I stay alive? Now that I think about it, the cartoons were the reason for my fascinations with video games, and not only that they were made, but how did people make them? Even now, I wonder how photons coming from the TV could have been so pleasant. The city of Orion told me that they govern the light, but to govern there must be flaws to a degree. That could not be the answer, could it? It is not that hard to alter reality, but it is altered when it comes to Gabriel. Can one alter my reality because I feel love? Negativity within the atom is what governs the light of the atom, or at least the spacemen said it does, but I am free, and that makes my existence interpret my surroundings. I interpret there is a place for negativity, and that would be the laws of all. But is that how a TV or the sunlight is controlled? Is that how such a pleasant cartoon that I saw as a child received its structure? According to the study that I did on cartoons, the frames through electricity causes motion, and pictures through motion makes animation. It could be a very real possibility that to live negativity would have a place, that my existence is possibly controlled through negativity, like that gray alien was saying in my head. Life is sort of horrible, and the awful smell was his strength. What would happen if the city were a bad authority? I asked myself. I would need more information from the authorities of the earth, because I do not want something evil to take over the planet or my family or friends. I started thinking about my first year of 1st grade. My mom, being my teacher, ordered books. The books and supplies came through the mail. At the time, it was law for every child in America to go to school. My mom was convinced that homeschooling was more educational than traditional school, although it had a lot more work. The school books arrived in the mail. It was time for 1st grade. The books had a fresh smell to them, as if they had just come off the press. I flipped through each book, eager to get started. There was not much work to do, mostly some small readings and some small math problems. Art was the strength of 1st grade. Art was included in everything I did. The first picture I needed to color was of 2 men fighting, with the word fight written on the bottom. My mom asks me, "Do you know what that word means?" Yes, I replied. It is something that we should not do. There are laws in this world to govern the good and evil, my mom said. Fighting is bad. Police are in this world to make sure evil people don't take over the world. I knew and trusted whatever my mom had said and became a friend to the police. Now that I no longer am a child, I can see that in some places, police do not exist at all. I do not like evil people. Evil must be a threat to the world. It was not long until I was placed in public school. The first year I went to CC Elementary School, I was nervous. There was so many other children, but the teacher was nice, as so many teachers are. The one thing I took out of 3rd grade was what my new best friend told me. He said, "If we go into the woods, and do not come back, we die." He said this, because I told him my plan on leaving my home for a while and build a tree house that my parents would not let me build. To my ears he was telling the truth, and not soon after I noticed other things that could kill me: cars, things under the bathroom sink, falls, and people. I asked Luke, my new best friend, what we should do about it. His response was, "That's how life goes. People are born to die, but not only die, they run from it as well." I always loved Luke. We were best friends, until he had to move. That made me heartless, so when I moved to Vermont, I was glad to have met Bam. I knew Alice wanted me to study until I found the solution to the wall that separated Orion and the Earth, as well as Alice from me. What happened to Luke? If he had not told me about the woods, I most likely would not be alive right now. Luke was sort of like a war hero. I wonder where he is. I embraced that part of the Earth. Is Luke out there? Even if Luke is out there, would he now be a lie? Or is there such a lie? I knew I loved Alice and had to break down a wall, so I considered and wrote it down. Luke taught me something about the Earth, and that had become me, and that me was gravity per SE. I write down things that would make Luke and the Earth creditable for the sake of Luke as well as others experiencing my truth. There is a science to the flight to an airplane. There are laws to the physical universe. The science to an airplane is creditable. Just try sticking your hand out of a fast-moving car in the wind. With that structure, the hand flies. If the Earth or the substance within the Earth was a lie, this would not happen. Growing up, I studied such things as a screw or the nut and bolt, the spiral pattern that makes up the screw. They hold objects together. There is not any further truth than the reality. Patterns make objects behave in such a way. People had spent much time and informed me who invented them, and where they come from, and all pointed to the truth. They pointed to the Earth being shaped by someone who had known about the bad things. If the city were part, then why would they want my vote? Why should I lose the Earth? My thoughts started to race. I could suddenly recall other things I learned in school, for instance war or pictures of weapons of war. They could have been lying, I say to myself. In the past, all signs that I received were bad, as if my body was standing at the edge of an exceptionally large building. I accepted that as reality. If that bad was not there, then what am I? Although I do not like fear, I accept it as part of life, as well as all the things upon the Earth. This Earth screams a message, just as my body would scream a message if I were on the edge of an exceptionally large building. If there was a wall within me, it seemed proper to say it makes me, who I am. I could envision Alice smiling at me. I could not help but love her. I continued to write and think these things that had built the wall, but now wondered if it should be destroyed. I remembered being 12 and my father was watching the television. He would always turn on the news at 5 o'clock. He would say he wanted to catch up with the world. Sometimes I could watch it with him, but that was if I had the patience. On one of those occasions, we started watching a police chase. To me this was exciting, excited to see good hunt down evil. Everything was under control until I watched the evil man appear in front of the police. The police, fearing for their lives, shot the man. This was all captured by a helicopter. After I saw this, I had many questions. I would have asked my father for the answer, but I did not want him to know that I questioned the police. For weeks questions went through my mind. Is it okay to kill? Where did the evil man go? Was the cop the hero? Rather than having unanswered questions, I accepted the whole incident as saying, that is what people do, everything will be all right. As I was recalling the incident, I started to remember my 4th grade. Our teacher Ms. Lee had a police officer come to class. He introduced himself as Sergeant Mitch Michaels. He was going to talk to the class. As he was talking, I could sense goodness and I knew that he was a good man. Whatever he said is right. One of the 4th graders asks him, have you ever got shot? Cops are always in the way of danger. That is why we have guns, to protect ourselves, Mr. Michaels said. Guns, war, they were part of life. If they were not, then this blue-eyed good-looking cop was lying to us. He would not lie, not to us. The teacher had us write a letter to the cop after he left the classroom, something that would express our appreciation. I cannot remember exactly what I wrote, but it was something like, you are a good man, I hate evil like you. He was one of my many heroes. To this day when I look at Gabriel, I can see the look in her face, the look of a cop, now wondering if I lied about being her father. The Earth, the light, and my surroundings would say that I would be lying. My truth is like a river project I did in 7th grade. Our teacher thought it would be good for us 7th graders to learn about rivers. There are several types of rivers, fast-moving rivers, winding rivers, sleepy rivers, etc. For us to have had that experience and to learn, the first thing we did with the teacher was bring in a large wooden box. We put sand in the box, and put our sand box on the science table. One end of the box was raised higher than the other to simulate the flow of a river. We then took some water and placed it at the top of the pretend river. It flowed down towards gravity. We then lowered the box to make a slower stream or raised it to make a faster moving stream. Depending on the gravity, or rather the raising of the box, it would change the river type, whether winding, fast-moving, and or sleepy, and that is how the rivers upon the Earth work. I accepted that as the truth. I thought I knew how children came into this world, but I did not. I did not bring Gabriel into this world. As I was thinking, I wondered what the truth was. I knew within my truth I did not have all the answers. I could not explain who created the universe and how far in each direction does it go. All I knew was Orion. I had to think hard about Orion. They said something about the light, that the universe that I see is no longer there, that it had died. The star's light may be shining, but as a corpse. Within the city they designed a habitation for life but could not help the fact that on the outside it appears dead, but within its enclosure it is full of life to them, and to the Earth it is lit with stars, looking lifelike. They also said they could not contain the light, which to me meant an evolving universe. If the city was telling the truth, then there are 2 truths. One truth is the universe is alive, our perception now, and the other is that it is dead, our perception in the future without Orion. When I thought deep enough, there was not a lie, so I had to pick one. Did I want to live in the past light, or did I want to live in the present light? I considered my childhood dream. After Mr. Michaels, the cop, talked with us, I had a sense of goodness and told myself that I could live on the earth, because he existed. I began to dream of my future. I wanted to play the piano. I wanted an old upright piano, one that I could use and tune. I wanted that piano in an old country house, with a wife that could cook. She would be cooking dinner or jam. I wanted kids and I wanted them to play the piano as well. I wanted 4 kids and I wanted all of them homeschooled. My wife and I would live on a small farm and never have to work outside of the home. My children could grow up and do the same thing. That was the dream at the time. I had not thought about that in years. Ever since the strange things started happening with cell phones, I gave up on my dreams, hoping to discover possibly death. Now that I reflect on the dream, I wondered how I ever thought it was possible to live on the earth without all the answers, without the problems facing the earth solved. Maybe Orion is the solution. I began to dream of Alice and our life behind the night sky. What if I am losing my life? There can only be one dream. I could not fail. Alice, she was convinced Gabriel was mine. I put that love deep within my heart. Even if Orion is a lie, living with Alice and the love between us could not be fake. Maybe playing along with Orion is real. People say to follow the signs. I figured they were talking about a stop sign, a material sign that stood out. In my freshman year at high school, I looked up into the night sky and tried to communicate with the sign. That would be the light my friends and I saw. Although the earth rejected the sign, and I would have to wonder why it did reject it, making it appear as a military flare. The strange thing about the military flares was that it was over a lake. Something not possible. I was giving a sign, and not only to me, but to the earth. The earth must be programmed by some sort of law, because the earth would have picked up on Bam's bedroom as a reality. I picked up my head from writing, looked at the clock. It was now 3 in the morning. I glanced back down at my writings and gave strong thought to the earth being programmed with limitations. I wrote everything down. Good, Alice will be up soon, and I can hand her a report. I walked over to the cupboard and made a vanilla cappuccino. Once finished, I took it outside. It was a cool night, about 65 degrees, and decided to get another drink, but this time it would be coffee, and I would get it at the gas station. The gas station was not far away, about 2 miles. I walked. It was a very silent night, and I was hoping no one would notice me out there. I walked into the gas station and went straight for the coffee. I got to the counter and gave the cashier a $5 bill. The cashier said, "Don't worry about it, a man just came in and paid for it, he is standing outside." "Thanks," I said to the cashier, wondering who would pay for my coffee. Outside I could see who it was. It was Mike, the man who I went swimming with the other night. "I was at the paper mill the day the machine exploded," Mike said, as I walked out of the front door of the store. I was shocked to hear those words. I stumbled in my mind to express what I was thinking. Mike started to explain what had happened. Before I could say anything, he got into his car and left. I walked back to my apartment shocked. What could that mean? It felt like seconds before I got home. I opened the door and glanced at the clock. It was now 5. Alice heard the door open and began to wake up. "Good morning, did you just get in?" she asks. "I went out for a coffee, but that's not all that I did. I was up all night writing about the wall," I explained. I grabbed my notebook and started to read. 9. The Revelation. Oh. And the second day of July my landline phone rang. I always get a landline despite the cell phone because the cell phone seemed unstable in the early 2000s. The technology was just introduced into society. "Hello," I said. "Honey, it's your mom. Your grandpa Jet is having a 4th of July party. There is going to be fireworks, a pig/bean roast, and a lot of friends and family. He would like you and Alice there and whoever you want to bring." "I will be there, and tell Grandpa Jet I'm bringing some friends," I said, right before I hung up the phone. I looked at Alice as she sat on the couch doing some paperwork. "My grandpa is having a party on the 4th and would like you and I to be there. We can bring other people too," I said. "That sounds awesome," Alice replied. After Alice's heart attack, she could not return to work, and now was filing for unemployment. The pet store owner did not want the responsibility for any problem that could occur but would make an exception. She could go back to work, but the best job for her would be something that did not involve heavy lifting. Hopefully, she would get unemployment, because the only thing we had to live off was my Social Security check. Good, I am almost done, she said, as she signed her name to the application. The day of the 4th, as usual, we had a late start getting to the party. I invited Max, Brendon, Bam, and Brenda. They probably are already there, I thought. Anxiety ran through my body. Alice in a rush grabbed the car seat with the baby in it and out the door we went. I looked at the car clock. It was 2 o'clock. We were supposed to be there at 1. My cell phone rang. I picked it up. It was my mom questioning where we were. We will be there in 15 minutes, I said. Uncle Gordon did not live far away. He lived in the next town over. He owned a small farm with plenty of land. He planned on having the party in one of his fields. We pulled up to notice dozens of cars all parked in the field. We looked to our right and saw a lot of people. Some were sitting at tables, some were playing games in the fields, some were standing around a fire. Giant tents were all around. One of the tents had smoke coming from the inside. That must be where they are cooking, I said. We walked through the field greeting others as we went. We walked until we found Uncle Gordon, and there he was, near the outdoor grill. I raised my hand as to say, I am here. I made it. Gordon quickly noticed and with a smile on his face walked toward me, and said, there is my favorite nephew, and who is this beautiful young lady? This is my wife. I said happily to display all her splendor. That is right, I missed the wedding. Well, you too. Welcome to my 4th of July party. This makes up for the wedding I did not attend. There is food and drink in the tent to your left, Gordon luxuriously said. I looked around to see if I could see any of our friends. I did not see them, so we decided to stay under the tent to keep Gabriel cool. Not long after, I noticed Brendon grabbing a beer. Hey you, where are the others? I said. Out by the parking lot. We were still waiting for you to arrive. I will go get them, Brendon said. They all came up and sat next to us at the picnic table. We started talking about the day, and in the midst of the conversation, Grandpa Jed noticed me and came over. Grandpa Jed was my father's dad. Jed said, how are you doing, Sonny? I introduced him to all my friends. Grandpa Jed and I have always been close, closer than me and my dad. I could always talk to him about anything and everything. In the summer days I would spend days at his house fishing, watching movies, or talking. Grandpa Jed was my favorite activity. I had not talked to him much since my dad left, but I knew we needed to spend some time together. Once Jed left, we started talking and laughing and having a good time. I thought it would be good to discuss the city. As you know, the spacemen will be back in about 7 months to take us to permanently live in Orion. That's if we vote them in. Because the Earth is covered in the ancient light of the past, here we live our lives as normal as we always have, but the reality of Orion will catch up to us. I want everyone's opinion. Are we going to vote in Orion? Brendon was first to speak. My parents showed me the reality of Orion, the foreign distant, alien worlds, and the reality is not of the Earth. I was shown while I was at the hospital. I was not supposed to discuss it, but rather keep it quiet. There is not another reality for either me or my parents. They have always hoped that the city would welcome me into it. As Max and Bam have seen, it appears as if they invited me to live there, and not only to live there, but to create. Is there any problem at all with forsaking the Earth? I asked. No, because my parents raised me to live in expectation of creating, plus we cannot contend. If we do not or cannot contend with the police or government, then we do not have an option. I know you have struggled, Brendon, but just knowing you have confidence makes me feel better, I said. Max spoke next. At first I thought that we would be in a lot of trouble, until we went through the portal and saw a ship. The ship took us to gardens as well as the Golden City. I felt complete there, but once we got back to Bam's apartment, I felt the experience was a mistake. Only through a second time in the city would I feel safe, and that was because Todd exists there. Todd and I were best friends until the car accident, and since his departure I have not felt the same. If I had an option, all those years ago I would have never gotten into the car. Losing Todd was awful, despite his parents did their best to explain that I still was his friend. At the time I could not look past the ancient light, and now that I cannot go back to living without Todd. When the spacemen come back, I am going with them, then Todd and I can come back and forth from the Earth. Wow, I started saying, you are taking a big chance. Could you really leave your family? I am not leaving my family, Max explained. I can come back and forth as Todd's been doing. Alice was next, and said, I have a baby, and not just a baby, but an experience from the city before we went together as a group. There my future husband told me that we were together and gave me Gabriel, and that future person that I saw in the city was Maple. I wanted a family so bad that I was open to anything, but just recently did I wake up my gravity towards the Earth. I tell myself that I will be with my love and baby. I am not going to the city without Maple. Maple thinks she is lying about the baby or being the father of it. What is it going to take, Maple? Max asked. Max added, we can always be friends. The city protects us from like me losing Todd, for instance. Alice and the baby she carried would deserve that. Brenda included. I have been in college researching the topic. It appears that civilizations around the world had to bend the laws of the earth just to discuss the matter. It is as if everyone knew about Orion, but had to keep it a secret. I dug deep in old textbooks, and my conclusion is that the earth is one big conspiracy, all meant for what? I could not figure that out, but I know that when the spacemen come back, I am going with them. The earth just is not the earth if Orion is the destination. Even if we all got educated so that we could secretly discuss the purpose of the earth, that still is not absolute. I need to be in the absolute reality, not a disguise for something else. I am scared, but it is the only way. Alice said, we still have 7 months. We should spend that time wisely. What about you, Bam? Any thoughts? Max said. I am going with the majority. I cannot live without my friends. But let me remind you, my parents are still in the fight to cover up Orion. There are others who are like that. We must be quiet and wise. No one outside our group should know about this. Bam's right, I said. And continued speaking, I think that if we went, we are going to be in a whole different environment. There will not be any sickness, but I am not sure if I will be me if I am not getting sick. When I was growing up, I embraced the world as it was. I did not think any other reality. It is hard to make sense of the people of Orion just watching us while we struggled. I could have used their help a long time ago. They left the earth and let it do its own thing. I took responsibility for the earth, and I would have a hard time handing over to people that just watched. They watched Max as Todd went out of his life, and that's just a tip of the iceberg. Right now, I am focusing on Alice. Deep down I want to live the life she described, what she saw seeing from within the future. Ever since Gabriel was born, I have been living in a dream. I have all new emotions. But I still hurt when I consider that I'm living a lie, although there is not anyone that can take away who I am, and even if they could, would I want them to? Alice looked at me. I could see compassion in her eyes, as if she were saying thousands of words at one time. We remain friends whose bond can't be broken. Majority rules. As for now, we go to the city, I said, hiding what I was going to do. But before we go, I want to study some more before I or my friends give a vote, I said, buying a little more time. Brendon asked, did anyone catch why the earth was abandoned? Brendon, according to what I heard while in the city, a long time ago when the universe was evolving and the stars of each habitable place was still shining, the creatures of the universe started capturing the elements, and not just the elements, but the very light of the elements. They would use the power of a negative charge to capture the elements. They would categorize them and give them their rightful place within the universe. Once all the elements were collected, it became a city. That would be the city of Orion. This is the interesting part, I continued. Once they harvested the stars, they began to live without time, and because there wasn't time, they were able to do a lot apart from the light that once shined. Once they noticed that they were missing something, that would be the earth. The star's light had not arrived here yet. It had not formed an earth. They began work to gain the earth. To them, the stars had died out a long time ago. After Orion noticed that it was missing a giant chunk of light, the creatures had to finish gathering all and attempted to gather the earth, but the only way to do that was to get inside the time of the people who lived there. That is what Orion had been doing to the people of the earth, breaking us out of the time of the past and bringing us into the future. Brendon, being surprised, said, that was a convincing lecture. Maple, the earth was never abandoned. No, the earth was never abandoned, but what is it? Max added. I have not told anyone this, I said, but as you all know, the mill where I was working when Mike and I were severely burned, I survived it, but Mike did not, or so I thought he did not. About a week ago I was up late and decided to get a coffee from the gas station. While I was pouring my coffee, Mike came in and paid for it. I knew I must talk to him. As I did, he said, well, a lot. So, the earth is purposely an illusion? Alice asked. I doubt that. That's what I made out of the conversation with Mike, I said. After that, Alice decided it was a good time to open up about her experience with Orion. When I first went to Orion, Alice said, I was shown holograms like Brendon's experience. While I watched them, they tried to explain children, and not just any children but wildlife. They explained that the living things upon the earth are once alive, it needs the proper settings, and those settings were found on the earth. For the animals, the earth provides water, shelter, food, and other creatures. The people need knowledge, love, and school to grow. Once the creatures are fully grown, they have the option to live in the city. That would mean if they were to live in the city at all. That makes sense to what Mike said about the Earth, I replied. Max added, if these things are true, then we were either collected or not by the city. That would explain why Todd is living there, because Todd was very special to his parents, and I know Todd, he would have never abandoned the love his parents gave him. I was listening to the others speak when I happened to hear a dog barking. I glanced over to my left and noticed Grandpa Jed sitting at the table next to ours. Oh no. I hope he was not there the whole time. Grandpa Jed noticed me looking at him, and he looked me straight in the eyes, and started walking toward me. Sonny, I want you to come over to my house tomorrow morning and we will spend a day together. I managed to say sure. At the end of the night, Uncle Gordon displayed a small fireworks show. Not impressive, but it was Uncle Gordon's and I had to love it. Afterwards we all packed up and went and walked toward our cars. We said our goodbyes and separated. Just getting home, Alice opened the door to our cozy apartment. She took Gabriel out of her car seat, changed her clothes, and placed her in her crib. I loved how Alice took care of the baby. Her mother instincts would have attracted anyone, and I could not help but be in love. The next morning, I was eating breakfast, knowing I was supposed to spend a day with Grandpa Jed. I was hoping it was just like any other day we spent together, but I feared he overheard us at the Independence Party. If he did, what would he say? Would he tell my family that Gabriel was not mine, or some other private thing we had discussed the day before? Asterisk. I will be back tonight, I said to Alice as she was waking up and I walking out the door. Grandpa Jed lived a few miles away in a rich part of the town. He made a lot of money growing up and could afford a big house. My dad was always proud of Grandpa's work ethics. He would say he had set the bar for our family. Grandpa, I said, as I opened the door to his white house. Sonny, I am glad you made it. I figured we would spend a day fishing. Grab that tackle box and the fishing pole I bought you and take it out to my truck. We go fishing a lot. He will probably take me to the same spot, which was not far from his home. I was right. 2 minutes later we were pulling out our fishing gear. We walked down to a clearing that overlooked the river. It was a nice day. I put a worm on my hook. I looked toward Grandpa and noticed Grandpa's perfect cast into the river. I was filled with expectation that he would catch a brook trout. Silence was behind the both of us for a couple of hours, before I broke the ice. Why did you bring me down here? I asked nervously. Yesterday, Grandpa started saying, I overheard your conversation. I want to tell you a strong story that has been passed down from generation to generation. Long ago there dwelled cavemen. These cavemen grew over thousands of generations. Some people believe they might have come from outer space. But one thing we are sure of is when these cavemen began, there were dinosaurs that lived amongst them. The dinosaurs, animals, and cave people lived upon the earth. They constantly worked on their bodies to keep them alive and working in orderly fashion. At the time, the creatures of the earth did not understand that the universe could not stop their existence. At some point the creatures of the universe decided to have a talk with the cavemen. We have come to introduce you to our city, in hope that you will find goodness due to all the work you have done upon the earth, they telepathically said. The cavemen took that the wrong way and thought they were trying to take away their strength, and because they feared, as every creature does, they cast out the universe as enemies. The more the cavemen thought about the threat of an easy living, they got paranoid and began to fight against themselves. They fought against their own strength, and because of that they grew weaker. Because of their new weakness they blamed the universe or the creatures of it and began a battle that still happens to this day. Jed went on to say, after much time the cavemen had a solution to losing so much of their strength. They would put their strength within their surroundings. They spent millions of years walking the earth, casting their strength into the stones, plants, animals, and even the sky. Over millions of years their population grew and expanded. Some of the cavemen thought it good to put their strength within their bodies, but most of them put their evolutionary strength in their surroundings. After some time, cavemen evolved into people, or some of the people. These people would go to the earth for wisdom or advice. That is when they would find the strength that their forefathers had put into the animals, stones, plants, etc. The strength was good for the people who had evolved, but there was a downside to using their strength, and that was they no longer could disagree with the earth, or they would be threatened consciously by disagreeing with the fathers. Is that why the earth hides certain information, for example the universe? I asked. Yes, Jed said. Everywhere one could go on the earth they will find bits of information that was stored in the rocks, water, and atmosphere. The information makes a cover for anything that existed outside the cavemen's ways. Their information will threaten you as they threaten the creatures of the universe. That is if you step outside of their reality, although outside of their reality is threatening anyways, due to a new reality. If you go beyond the cavemen you are your own authority per se. I ask, if there was another reality or universe, what would the cavemen do if they were more powerful? The Earth at this time is being used by the creatures of the universe. They could not get rid of the cavemen without the cavemen's permission. They decided to use the cavemen as sort of like a grass, a covering for the Earth, an atmosphere of survival. Maple, Jed pauses, there is a giant computer out there. We are living in a computer. We are living in a personal computer running PBR. They got plants and asteroids as part of their computer, an asteroid as a working function of the computer. A long time ago they pushed us out their back end and now they have come to pick us up. The reason we do not know is because of these cavemen. Is the Earth being used for breeding? I asked, wondering if the things I saw about Orion was the absolute reality. For creatures to exist, the place that they are born in must be fit for them to grow. The Earth is fit for humans and wildlife. The atmosphere of survival causes all to be resistant to the universe, which in turn gives intelligence to the living. These would be great worth to the city. My father and his father and his father's father at some point had to let go of their own ability to live and had to make peace to survive the universe. You must understand that the caveman's wisdom would not go much further than the cave. Most of the evolving people and creatures wanted more, for instance a city or a boat. How about a cruise ship, I said. Similar to more stuff, Jed said. For the people to expand their ways, and thinking, Jed continued, they had to make peace because of their forefathers' mistake, and that peace would make them closer to the creatures out there living in the city. These creatures have always been around, so, as soon as people break out of the wisdom of the Earth, they are confronted with the universe and ultimately the original plan that started billions upon billions of years ago. This is what the universe would have happened, for people to find the plan and work as one. The Earth is being used for breeding grounds and a variety of creatures come here to give birth. That would include the lion and bear. My father was born here, and his father was born here, and so on. Our tradition, he went on to say, is to live in the city. If you dig deep down in your heart, commit to our family and decided that we were friends, then you can expect to have a child, before you ever make the child, and that is because the time here on Earth is in its own time. Did you receive my father in a similar way as I received Gabriel? I asked. No, Grandpa, Jed replied. I went to the city first and then come back and everything was the same as I left. My father never knew that I was gone. But I know who did receive their child in a way that was like yours, and that would be your father. According to him, while he was still growing, a baby showed up in your parents' newly purchased home. At first, they did not know what to do with it, they were confused, but because a baby appearing without anyone causing the baby to appear there, your mother decided to keep it. She had always wanted child but could not have children. The baby that your parents found was you. Yesterday when I overheard your conversation with your friends, you had mentioned Gabriel. That is why I brought you out here today. I wanted to comfort you and not only comfort the idea of having a child, but the loss of your father as well. Your father said days prior to his disappearance he was going home to create the part of life that did not exist when you appeared on his living room floor, the part of life that spoke truth, his truth. You have an option to live in the city, Jed continued, you and your friends, and if you do not go you will be as your father, never knowing if the child you raise is yours. That is why he had to leave, to know that he had his truth. He would want the same for you. The only reason I am upon the Earth is to make sure your father got to his destination, but now, I see you, missing some of the best moments in life. I want you to know and love Gabriel as yours. You must go to the city. Afterwards we can all come back and play a family, a rich family. As the conversation was ending, I felt a pull on my line. I have a fish, I said. I pulled and sure enough it was a fish. I fought it and slowly reeled in an 18-inch brown trout. The day had come to an end, and my grandpa drove me to my car. I love you, Grandpa, I said, as I got into my car and drove home. 10. Life behind the night sky. I have to get my mom something special, I said as I walked through the aisles of the big box store. There were so many things I could choose from. How about this candle set, Alice said as she pointed to one of the shelves. If it's from you she will love it. As she was saying this, I was thinking about what I got Alice. I knew that I wanted to get her something special before we went to Orion. We would leave in 2 months. This would be our last Christmas before we were citizens of Orion. Snow was coming and so we hurried up the selection process and I agreed to settle for whatever she thought best. Your mom will love the candle set, Alice said as we pulled onto the highway. I hope so. This will be our last Christmas together as children. These moments have to be perfect, and my mom must know. She must discover it in such a way that she will not stop us, I say. Within what seemed to be minutes we got home and rushed into our apartment eager to wrap presents. We had tonight to get Christmas ready before Gabriel came back from my mom's. With Christmas music playing, Alice prepared Christmas Eve dinner. I wrapped the presents. Winter Wonder played on the radio as snow began to fall. Our apartment was filled with the aroma of baked apple pie and ham. Alice was wonderful at baking. Whatever she did in the kitchen was always my favorite. I had to wonder if these moments would be always exciting if what the spacemen offered us was not offered. They told us that we would be permanently together, separate but together, sort of like a soulmate. I wish I were there right now. I could solve some of the most important questions running through my mind. I looked down into the shopping bag and pulled out a framed painting I was giving to Grandpa Jed. On the painting were the words, "Family is forever." That is fitting. I thought our family will always be. Thinking about the last visit with Grandpa, I was filled with joy. I could not wait to give this to him, but this would be the last time I would see him as a child. After this I would have sealed for myself the truth of Gabriel, which takes a long time. Once I come back, I will have changed, but on the earth as well as in Grandpa's body will not have changed. Gabriel will not have changed either. She will still be 1 year old. For Alice and me billions upon billions of years will have passed, but on the earth when we return it will be the same, unless the whole family does what Jed said, and live as a rich family possibly in a whole different time, maybe even the times of very few living on the earth, that is if all makes it possible. Thinking on this stuff was exciting, but I had questions. I was still on the earth and I had to wonder if my father was going to come back to the earth. I tried to tell myself that I would not be here if he were not going to help raise Gabriel, but in the light of the earth I could not feel as good as I could if I were in the city. I had 2 months left and then reality will be my life. I will be okay. "Dinner's ready," Alice said from the kitchen. I walked into the kitchen happy to smell baked ham with pineapples. I was hungry. I sat down gladly, thanked Alice, told her she was wonderful, and began to gather my plate. That night after supper and all the Christmas duties were done, I laid next to Alice, her head resting on my shoulder. This will always be like this, love between me and Alice. I knew a few good things about living and one of these was Alice. I got sleepy and fell asleep. Asterisk. I got presents, I said as I opened the door to my mother's house. Kids were already there waiting to open their presents. I showed off the big bag of presents I was holding, hoping to excite the kids. "Maple, let us open ours now," the kids said. I caved in and started handing out the presents. Hugs and kisses I got from the children and I loved every moment of them. I left Grandpa Jed's present under the tree. Once he noticed it, he opened it and yelled across the room and said, "Isn't that the truth?" I walked over to him and took a seat next to his, hoping no one else would hear our conversation. I said, "After you told me how I came to be and other great things, I could not help but want to give you this gift, but I leave in 2 months. How will I find you in the city?" Grandpa Jed tipped his chair back and said, "I am glad you asked. There are laws in Orion, laws like not allowing others to enter the home occupied by the owner, so obviously that is not a possibility, but there are places that we can get together. They are like the earth. We can have family gatherings in such places. My father takes me to such places, places to fish or hike. There are public beaches, mountains, and whole worlds waiting for us to explore. I have not mentioned this to you, but in the city, I have a job. I grow apples in the mountains of APK, but not through old matter that exists but fresh matter, fresh from the love I give it. I grow some of the best apples around, or at least some say so. I go to the mountains of APK every 50 years. I asked, "Why do you not grow the apples in your own estate instead of the mountains?" If I grow them for APK, I feel like I am part of the bigger picture, creating love for my fellow man. It is the loving thing to do, plus I have 200 children and want to set for them a good example. I have been in that city for a long time, more time than you can count. I bet you originally thought I was 70, everyone who sees me on the earth thinks so. The earth does that age thing. The cavemen learned about people their own way and shared it with the surrounding environment until it appeared to be the truth of the people. If something taught you Maple, you must get rid of the knowledge. I am trillions upon trillions of years old, and everybody in the city treats me like I am a beginner. Grandpa explained. Grandpa and I talked most of the day as the family came up to give a merry greeting. Soon it was dinner, and afterwards I knew that I must tell my mother my intentions and question her about her dealings with Orion. The variety of food lightened up the atmosphere as I watched a lot of hands grab food, their portion of a variety of food. Green beans, stuffing, turkey, gravy, and Aunt Carol made her special dish which tended to be my main course. I grabbed the large spoon that sat on top of the casserole and gathered as much green bean casserole as I could fit onto my plate. Holiday music sounded throughout the house, and time went by fast. Soon, after most had eaten, everyone explained that they must go home. I hear didn't the night fly by, as someone walked out the door to their car. I watched as most of the people gathered their belongings and walked out the door. Aunt Carol stayed behind. She thought it good to help my mother clean. As they were doing this, Alice took over my mom's effort to clean and told her she needed to rest. My mom agreed and sat down in the living room. This is the moment I considered. We have some time now to discuss Orion. I sat down on the couch next to her, a bit nervous, but anxious. The next couple of hours were going to be important. I started talking. Mom, we never talk about certain stuff, and I want to give it a try. My friends and I have discovered a portal, and that portal leads to a city. That would be the city the universe is made up of. The universe invited my friends and I to live there. I had a talk with Grandpa, and he explained that he has been living there for a long time. He also mentioned that I wasn't born in a natural way, that you found me on the living room floor. Gabriel came in a similar way, I said. My mother looked at me shocked. She struggled for words and said, "When do you plan on moving there?" "In a couple of months," I said. "I will explain it the way I lived it," she said. "When I was younger. When I was a teenager I worked hard for a child, but in my young adult years the doctors told me that I could not have children. I was upset and began to seek for help from the universe. Slowly things started happening for me, strange things, things that caused me to look deeper. I would not know if I would call it a portal, but a door opened into another dimension. Your father did not know about it at the time and I did not tell him. I went into that other dimension and found the future, and not just the future, but reality, a new reality. The people there told me that I needed to make money because when I got back to the earth, I would have a child. I stayed in Orion until I had enough money. I did not see your father the whole time I made the money to take care of you, but one thing I did know was your father had to at some point work for your life to exist, for the truth that you were ours, that in truth you were our child, that you did not just appear there by, who knows. I know what Jet has been saying, that your father went to Orion to establish our family as truth, as a family. I just hope that it is true. There is so much confusion in my mind, as if I have been on the earth for too long. I find it hard to accept that I made money at all. Once you turned 19 my money ran out and you appeared to have a child of your own, and like you, I faked reality to stay on the earth with you. When you appeared on the living room floor as a baby, I had to convince your father to pretend you were ours. In response to her story I said, that is like Alice and me. Creatures that lived in the city explained to Alice that I had lived with Gabriel in the future. She immediately found herself to be with hopes of a child. She did not know what to say about that. So, when we were in Florida together, she convinced me to say the baby was mine. Through the experience I slowly fell in love with her. I knew I did not want to lie to everyone, but I loved her. The love was so intense that after a while I found myself proving the child was mine. As we spoke, I started wondering how my mom would get back to the city. When I questioned her, she said they usually come and get me. They have throughout your whole life. This time I am wondering if it would be best if I go with you. Hopefully, I will find your father there. Alice walked into the living room after cleaning and I told her everything, about Gabriel and Orion as well as our plan on living there in a couple of months. Asterisk. Months passed quickly and the day came. Brendon, Max, Brendon, Bam, Alice, my mom, and I stood at the entrance to the portal. "Are we ready?" I said in a loud voice. We walked through the opening and within seconds all of us were in a room surrounded by wild vegetation. In the distance we saw the spacemen walking toward us. They took us, most of us who had never lived in Orion. We had to be physically redesigned to live on the level of cleanliness and structure required to sustain life. My mother was treated with luxury in Orion for bearing a child. The red-colored spaceman led me into a golden-built, marvelous, out-of-this-world designed room. He led me into the room. It appeared to be some sort of a hospital. Golden, clean, and sparkly tools were throughout the room. "Come," the spaceman said, pointing to a huge golden sphere, large enough to fit a person on the inside. Most of the sphere was hollow, but a notable structure. "The sphere will move. Hold on to the gold. There is nothing to fear," the spaceman said. With bare feet I walked the narrow golden steps. I placed my hands on the bars of the sphere, embracing myself. The spaceman began to give a touch of charity to some of the buttons and objects in the room. The sphere begins to move. My body begins to feel such love and ecstasy that I never knew was possible for a living being to feel. I am being cleaned. I am being washed. Cookies, mint, and candy filled the air. I could feel years of garbage being removed from my body. This is unbelievable. Days was my body worked upon in absolute charity. The others had similar experiences. After we got an official place in Orion, the spacemen brought my mom home to be with Dad. Us kids went for the ride. We walked up to the gates of their estate. My dad quickly noticed and shouted, "Sonny." I ran up to him and gave him a big hug. I explained to him the money and house offered to Alice and me, that I am going to my new home to make home, and afterwards I wanted us all to go back to the same time on the earth and play rich family. He laughed and greatly welcomed the idea. Alice and I walked into our brand new house, making plans as we went. The spacemen thought Alice and I were a good investment and treated us to luxuries as well as millions of dollars. With that money we furnished our home. Soon we would be back on the earth raising Gabriel and helping her to see the light behind the night sky. Gabriel was truly our child. Alice says confident we will establish our lives as well as Gabriel's. Yes, Gabriel is ours. Perhaps the spacemen nor their city were bad. Alice walks close to me and gives me a comfortable hug. I love you, Maple, she says. The world behind the night sky is incredible, rich, and booming with activity. I now know, I know. Creatures built a city behind the night sky. They control the world below through giant cell phone towers. They have power over the very waves that make us, us. Mr. Ward was right. Waves coming from outer space is behind the night sky. It was behind the sky. I say to Alice, it was behind, i.e., covered, grabbing her hand and walking into our several $1,000,000 house that resided behind the night sky. The end. About the author. Brendon Holden, always having hidden his ability to create and specially to create for the public, worked slowly on the new and exciting book Behind the Night Sky. This book Behind the Night Sky is the joy of his heart. He has spent a considerable amount of time on his most favorable and valuable book Behind the Night Sky. Brendon Holden has written other books such as Smoking by the River and children's books titled Toby Learns Patience and Max the Juggler. He has expressed works of art in such books as Drawings by Brendon and Art. He is also author of The Game and 7th Grade Streets. It would be a delight to his heart that not only is his work enjoyed, but that society benefits from it as much as the creative ideas have benefited him. Notes, extras and fun pictures.
Well, that sums up the story of what lies behind the night sky, Maple's journey. I hope you enjoyed the reading. I put several years. It was several years of work in this book. All the sheet music was done by me. All the illustrations were done by me. The story was done by me. It's published, self-published through Blurb Incorporation. They did an excellent job. They do an excellent job at printing this book out. I hope you get a book. I hope you will support, the story, Maple's story. Although it's untrue, I think that through just pretending and make-believing, we can support the generation that is by not making law the reason to write or to be or to express oneself. So, that's how I learn. That's how I grow, and I hope I've encouraged you all to grow and read and write and to attempt to do music. Not because it's not enjoyable, because it is enjoyable. So please support the book, and share this video with a friend, share it with a family member, and say, this could possibly be a reference, that you could hold on to just gain, some of my work in writing and, publishing work and, but anyways, I'll try to stop right there, and I hope you get the book, and I hope you enjoyed this journey, and all the information you need is going to be in the description, as well as for the sheet music, whether you want to print it out yourself, or you want to share the book with a friend. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful night. Have a great. Well, I'm kind of screwing up here with. This was not rehearsed, so I'm just kind of going over here. But this book is actually only in my hand for a couple more days before I mail it to the Copyrights Office. So I wanted to make these videos is what I could cover with these videos. But again, this is a great book. I hope you get it. Have a wonderful time. Have a wonderful night. Bye.